What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Ford F-150. Huge thanks to Ford for providing me here with the new F-150 to review for you guys today. So about this new 14th generation of the F-150. Well, it doesn't look much different than the old one. That is one thing. It's really hard to tell the two apart, but this is heavily reworked. But you know, this is also the best-selling vehicle in North America, so I don't blame Ford for not wanting to mess with success. People like the styling of the old one, and so I think they nicely evolved it for this new one here. Now this is just an XLT model, which is the second from the bottom as far as trim levels go, and so this one though gives you a better look at, you know, what a more lower priced version of an F-150 that's more attainable is going to look like. Now this one has like the halogen headlights, which don't look quite as cool as the LEDs, and obviously don't light the road as well as the LEDs do. And you can get the LEDs here on the XLT on the top 302A trim. This is a 301A to be exact. There's a million configurations and trims for these. It gets very confusing, but this is a 301A V8 XLT with the 6.5 foot bed, and so that's the one we're looking at here. But it looks great in Velocity Blue, I have to say. It really pops here in the sun. And also I really like this new grille on these F-150s. Now there's several different grille designs, again, depending on which appearance package you get and which trim level you get. They all have different grille variations, but overall I really like that those grilles kind of nicely blend in with the headlights there. It's a really cool look. You also have a flatter hood in the front there, but I also like the ridges you have on the hood here. Gives it some extra visual appeal. You also have little fog lights there in the front bumper, which again can be LEDs if you get that LED package here on the 302As and higher. But yeah, I think it looks really nice up front still and does look fresh and modern, and so I think it looks pretty good. Coming down to the sides here, you also have some pretty small wheels on this one. These are 18-inch wheels, and these are on these big 65 series tires. So it's going to have one of the most comfortable rides out of all the F-150s most likely, but certainly will be one of the least sharp handlers out of the bunch with these small wheels. I really like this fender vent here, which shows your trim level as well as this little vent in the fender. It's a nice little piece there. And by the way, all this chrome you're seeing is an option. You can go for a blacked out package or a body colored package if you'd like instead. But I think it's a nice little touch there. This one also has running boards, and you also see some of the signature F-150 traits that are still here, like this dip you have in the front windows. That was something that I guess F-150 buyers liked in the previous generation, and so they kept that here for this new one. And then also going down to the sides in the back, again, this is the longer 6.5 foot bed. You can get a 5.5 foot bed as well as an 8 foot bed depending on the trim and stuff. And this is of course the SuperCrew trim. You can of course get a super cab and also a regular cab version, which is the 2-door version, although that 2-door version is now limited to only the base XL and this XLT trim are the only ways you can get that short wheelbase version. But anyway, going out to the back here in the F-150, it is nice and refreshed as well. So you have a little bit more curvature there to the tailgate. You also have the F-150 embossed there in the back, which looks nice. And overall, again, it just adds a little bit extra appeal to the already established F-150 formula here in the back. Also, while we're out back there looking at the truck bed here, the 6.5 foot bed, it's, you know, pretty easy to get into now. It still isn't as easy as the GM trucks. I still really like how they have a built-in step in the bumper, whereas this and the Ram make you pull out a step, and then you also have on the F-150 here, you also have a little railing you can pull out. So it's a more involved process, but if you don't want to just hurdle up into the bed there, you know, you do have a pretty easy access there as long as you're willing to pull out a bunch of stuff in order to help you get up into the bed there. But anyway, once you're in that bed there, this one has the spray-in bed liner, which is a nice touch, and you have lots of tie downs there. Obviously, plenty of space here with a 6.5 foot bed as well. And this one does have also the onboard generator. This is the 2 kilowatt version, and so you have the 2 plugs there in the back and the generator on board here, so that you can power a lot of, you know, work tools and whatever you want to plug in back there. Honestly, should be able to run for a good while. And so very cool to have that. And of course, that is something that it's a feature that's a little bit more expanded on those Power Boost versions and those higher trims of the F-150. But yeah, so I mean, overall, still a really nice truck from every single angle. I don't think it's going to offend anybody or upset anybody. I think it still is very attractive looking, and you know, so I think it's not going to be quite as extreme as like the Chevy and stuff, which has some more polarizing looks. But I still think that you know, this and the Ram are probably some of the best looking trucks out there. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. This version of the F-150 here still has a traditional key and a key slot, and it's actually a switchblade key. So you just hit that, and that's how you do it. So this is just one of the older, more basic Ford keys. Now, if you go for any trim beyond this 301A, if you go for a 302A or any other higher trim of the F-150, you get a proximity key and push button start. If you've never had the luxury of having the ability to put your key in your pocket and just hit the start button and not have to dig into your pocket to turn on your vehicle or unlock your vehicle, it is a very nice feature to have. I highly recommend it. It's only like another $3,000 to go up to a 302A at least to get that feature. I would strongly suggest getting that. But anyway, here in this F-150, you just, put the key into the slot here, twist it, and it starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in an XLT version of the F-150, my wife and I actually did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, it still is a nice improvement over the previous generation F-150, but whenever you don't have all those new fancy options that you get on the new F-150s, this doesn't really feel that much different. They've made some nice improvements, and it is still a nice interior. But yeah, it's certainly a far cry from those higher trims and a lot of the really cool tech you get in those. All right, so setting off here in the 2021 F-150. So the first thing I think you notice here, well, of course, you're sitting up nice and high in the F-150, just like any other pickup truck, and pretty good visibility too. You do have this A-pillar with this grab handle, which is a little thicker than I would like. It's thicker than when you get on the average car or SUV, but you're sitting up high enough, it shouldn't be too big of an issue, and you have excellent visibility down here with these doors since they scoop down so low and the glass is so large. Really great view out of the sides. View out of the back is also very good in typical truck fashion. No surprises there. Other things here about the F-150 you notice. So this one runs the 10-speed automatic transmission, and they all run 10-speed automatics, by the way, and it's usually pretty good. It's very quick with its shifts, but there are a few times every once in a while where it's a little rough in my 42 miles of driving I've done so far, and I'll continue to test that here during my entire week that I have here with the F-150. Another thing I really love is the brake response here. Really starts to bite right towards the top of the pedal, and it's very responsive. So it gives me a lot of confidence that, the second that I need the brakes, I can count on them to act right away, and I really like that. Throttle response is also really good, especially here with this naturally aspirated V8 that this version is running. Typically the XLT will, the standard engine it's going to have is a 3.3 liter naturally aspirated V6, but this one is optioned up for the V8, which in the XLT trim is a $2,000 option. If you go for like a Lariat trim, it's only an $800 option. And so yeah, it just depends on the trim. There's a million different variations for these F-150s, so you'll have to go on the configurator and really dive into the options yourself if you want to figure out exactly how much it would cost for what you want and how it all would pair up and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, that's all good, and yeah, steering weight also feels nice and natural, feels pretty good. It is a lot of turns, in typical truck fashion, so you really got to crank the wheel a lot here in these to, get your turning done. And but yeah, I've been really impressed with the refinement in these new F-150s. I mean, you hear, it's actually a fairly windy day. You don't hear any wind noise. Road noise is very subdued. You hear a little bit of tire noise and stuff, but it's really not bad. And you really don't even hear much of this V8 engine either. But it does have a nice little V8 burble to it whenever you get on it, which is always welcome, especially if you're, opting up for this V8 engine. Chances are you want to hear it. And so, it's nice to have that, although it is very mild, much quieter than a Mustang or something like that. But we'll go ahead and put it up into the sport mode. There's several different drive modes. There's ones for bad weather conditions and muddy roads and stuff. But anyway, we'll put it up into the sport mode here. Let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. And here we go. Very responsive. Wow. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Man, so the F-150 here runs the 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine. It's port directed and direct injected. And for 2021, it actually has cylinder deactivation as well, which is a new thing for 2021. But it just goes down to 4 cylinders. It's not quite as advanced as the Chevy system, which has all kinds of variations. This one just shuts down 4 of those cylinders whenever it deems it's appropriate. But anyway, it's a good amount of power. It's 5 more horsepower than last year for 400 horsepower total, 410 pound-feet of torque, which is 10 more pound-feet than last year. And 0 to 60 times are probably going to be in the low 6-second range. So that will also depend on the tire setup you have, the wheelbase, all the options you have as far as how heavy it is and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say it's safe to assume something in the low 6 seconds here for the V8 powered ones. And also in sport mode here, it really must open up something, or it's piping in something with the speakers. I don't know what's going on, but it definitely has more of a character to this V8 engine and more sound in this sport mode than it did in the regular mode, which I've been using for the past 40-some miles here. Yeah, this sounds good, and it's so responsive and so strong feeling. The V8 engine is really great. Now, it's not the most powerful engine, not even close these days, with the Power Boost Hybrid having the most torque and power, and even the regular EcoBoost 3.5-liter V6, that will also do about the same horsepower, but way more torque, almost 100 extra pound-feet of torque in that one. So, this isn't the strongest motor, but it still is going to be one of the best as far as payload goes. Be very strong towing still, and you really don't have much of a fuel economy disadvantage over those EcoBoost engines either. So this V8 I think is still a really great choice. But we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the new F-150 handles. Again, so we got these 18-inch wheels and 65 series tires on this one. So it's not going to handle as well as some other F-150s with larger wheels and a little bit of a more street-oriented setup is going to feel. This is not going to be quite that good. But yeah, it still does a decent job. These modern trucks still handle much better than their predecessors. I don't think the handling is wildly different from the previous generation F-150. It's been several years since I drove one of those, and that was also a 2.7 EcoBoost that I had in the last F-150 I tested of the previous generation. So that's going to be, probably a lighter motor than this V8. But it does okay. It's a truck. You can't really expect a whole lot here. And again, I would strongly suggest going up to some bigger wheels and tires if you're, looking for something to be a little bit sharper. The 20-inch wheels you got on the higher trims should have a little bit of better handling. But basically it just really comes down to the fact that this suspension setup still is pretty old school. So unlike the Ram, which has, an air suspension you can get and has coil springs in the back, this is still leaf springs in the back, nothing too advanced. There's no, option to get a more advanced suspension here in the F-150s. It's just, the basic stuff, and that's it. So, I think that because of that, this doesn't handle as well as the Ram. It doesn't ride as well as the Ram. The Ram is much smoother. That is one thing I've noticed, is even these roads, which, aren't super bumpy, they're not super smooth, so they create a little bit of noise, but they don't have a ton of potholes and stuff. But this, I've just noticed in the past day or so I've been driving the truck so far, that it's very busy with its ride, at least, again, with this suspension setup. Again, if you have a different version with different wheels and tires, different wheelbase, different cab configuration, there's a million different variations, but if you're looking at a 6.5-foot bed crew cab version, it's going to be a little bit of a bouncier ride, and it's not quite as buttoned down, and like I said, just feels a little more floaty, which means it's very comfortable, but it does just mean that you do feel all the little bumps still, and you're always just kind of bopping around, I guess is the best way to put it. So, I would say that it's not, again, it's just not even close to being as nice as the Ram as far as ride quality goes. But it's a truck. Most people probably don't care a whole lot. And I think Ford was really just going for comfort. And I think it does have that floaty, soft truck ride that I think most truck buyers will probably want. I will say this ride is more comfortable than the Chevy. Those are a little bit stiffer with their ride and a little less comfortable. This is certainly, I think, more comfortable than those. I think the ride is also a little bit more well-behaved than the Nissan Titan. Man, this V8 is really satisfying to use. Oh, it's great. Yeah, I know the EcoBoost engines are very impressive. I'm sure the new hybrid version is also very impressive, but maybe it's just because I own a Mustang Bullet, but something about having a V8 always feels nice, and I think this is a great choice here. Anyway, so a couple other things here. So one thing that does help out the handling a little bit is that, with the aluminum body panels here on the F-150, it certainly makes it a little bit on the lighter side compared to some of the others. And so, these start with a curb weight, I think, around 4,900 pounds. Again, there's a whole Excel spreadsheet for exactly what the curb weight is going to be depending on your wheelbase and engine and, you know, like I said, all the other millions of variables you get with the F-150. But I will say that it does probably feel a little bit lighter than some of the others out there as far as just, you know, you're feeling, it doesn't feel quite as weighty as the Ram, I would say, and probably even a little less weighty than the Silverado and stuff too. So it has that going for it, at least in the handling department, even if it doesn't have, you know, too advanced of a suspension setup. But some other specs here about the F-150 that are most important for truck buyers is, you know, payload and towing. And that is one area where the F-150 really excels and really is one of the best in its class. Payload, by the way, is actually best in class as far as the available payload you can get. This maxes out beyond the others. So the payload rating is another whole Excel spreadsheet of, you know, depending on what wheelbase you get, what engine you get, what, you know, configuration and variant and all that kind of stuff, that will all affect, you know, what payload you actually get on your F-150. But for these V8 versions, the payload ratings are some of the highest out there. This one is going to range somewhere around 2,100 pounds to about 2,650 for the V8s, depending on, again, what wheelbase and stuff. But that's kind of the range you're looking at there. And these V8s also tow between like 9,400 pounds and 13,000 pounds is their range. But you can max out with an EcoBoost F-150 around 14,000 pounds, which is very impressive. And if you have a normal driver's license, you're only going to be able to tow in most states about 10,000 pounds anyway. So all the engine options here in the F-150 should be able to tow what you're legally allowed, unless you're going to have a more advanced license. So it should be more than sufficient for basically everybody out there with normal towing needs. But we're hitting some potholes here on this road going about 35 miles an hour, and it still soaks them up really well. For a thing with leaf springs in the back, I mean, you know, and it is, of course, body on frame and stuff like, you know, any other full-size truck, but you don't really have a lot of that cab jitteriness like you used to get, where you could really feel the bed rocking around back there and vibrating a lot more. You get a lot less of that here in this newest generation, and so it really, you know, the whole thing just feels a little more solid and, you know, just a little less truck-like than before, I think, in a good way. It's still obviously, it's not going to feel quite as refined as like a Honda Ridgeline or something like that, which is an actual unibody truck. You know, it still gives you a lot more reverberations and unrefinement than something like that would, which really feels a lot more like an actual SUV instead of an actual truck. But, you know, as far as body on frame stuff goes, I think this is still, again, pretty good. Ram is still the king, though. Another really big improvement here for the 2021 F-150s is their Ford Copilot 360 system. So the 2.0 system is actually standard on everything from an XLT and up, the base XL trim. I guess since that's for people that want something really bare bones or fleet buyers, you know, they don't have it on that trim. But XLT and up here, you do get it. It gives you a whole laundry list of features, and it's really great to have that. Now, this one has the 2.0 assist option, so that adds extra stuff. You get adaptive cruise control. It also will do lane keeping assist and stuff, which we'll try out here on the highway in a minute. And actually, even later on in 2021 here, you'll be able to get hands-free driving in higher trims of the F-150. And so that is something where it's going to have driver monitoring stuff built into the higher versions of the F-150. This one does not have those sensors built in, but it'll monitor the driver, make sure you're paying attention, but then allow you to do truly hands-free driving, much like GM's SuperCrew system. And so it's very awesome. We'll have to, you know, test that out whenever that actually is available to consumers and see how well that actually works in reality. But very promising to hear that they're actually doing something similar, because I absolutely love SuperCruise and think it really takes highway driving to the next level, and, you know, it's very luxurious and helps you to really relax. Man, this V8 pulls really strong too in these higher RPMs. You also get the torque a little bit sooner here in the 2021 V8 version than you did in the past. But I mean, the way this thing climbs in speed, it's strong. It really is a very strong runner out here on the highway. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and put on this adaptive cruise control system here. And I do have the lane keeping assist system on as well. Now, that is something you have to make sure is actually turned on in the vehicle settings. You go into the features tab here in the sync 4 screen, and you have to actually select that. This truck did not have it already on, and so instead it was just a lane departure warning type of thing, where it would just be like, hey, you're going over the lines. It would not actually help me steer. But now we're going around a corner here on the highway, and it is actually doing the steering here. And so this is the first time I've encountered a Ford system that does this, and so this is my first time testing out their application here of these lane centering systems. And I also have the lane centering on its more advanced settings, so that it really does a good job of keeping itself in the lanes here. So I'll continue to test it here today and throughout the rest of the week to see just how well it works. But so far, it's doing a pretty good job. It's not ping-ponging around really. It's doing a really good job of keeping itself centered in the lane. It really did a good job of steering there on that first corner. And while we're out on the highway here, another thing that's really good, I mean, you do have some road noise here, but I'd say it's pretty good for a truck, and especially a low-grade truck at that, as far as the trim levels and stuff. So I think it's really nice out here just cruising on the highway. The adaptive cruise system works great. That is something I've tried out in other Fords in the past, and I tried it out yesterday as well, and that does do a very good job. It's not too rough or anything. It's very smooth. So I don't know if you saw it there, but I'm letting the vehicle do the steering for me. I'm just kind of hovering my hands over the wheel here. And there was a couple of times where it got a little shaky with the steering there, and wasn't perfectly centered, but it is doing a pretty good job. And these road lines are also painted a little oddly with the way you have the paving strip there in the middle, so that might be throwing it off a tiny bit, but it is doing a pretty good job. But you can see, I mean, if you're looking here, the steering wheel is doing a little bit of sawing back and forth to try and keep itself really centered. It maybe is fighting a little bit of a crosswind here, so it is a little bit of a windy day. But it's doing a pretty good job here, I gotta say. It's not the best, it's not the greatest out there. There's some other lane keeping assist systems that are better, but this is still pretty good. It also doesn't have too much intelligence as far as when your hands are actually on the wheel, because it was telling me to keep my hands on the wheel while my hand, as you can see, was on the wheel. So I think you have to give it a little bit of a resistance every once in a while for it to know that you're actually here. So I think this is still going to be obviously one of the most advanced systems out there. No one else is shooting for hands-free steering here this year, at least. I know GM has the technology, but it's not in the Silverados yet, and Ram doesn't have anything like this. So I think this is still the most advanced system out there, and so for highway driving, as of right now, I'd say this is probably going to be one of the most relaxing systems out there, because you can just let the truck kind of do some of those minor corrections for you. Obviously, you still have to be doing the steering yourself and paying attention and all that. But yes, I'm going to be driving this new F-150 for the next week here, and I'll drive all over the place and do a bunch of hauling and stuff. Then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and its competition, and anything else that I noticed here during my week of driving. All right, so I've been driving the new F-150 here for a week now, and I've put 238 miles on it in my week of driving here. And I really like the F-150. I mean, it's a very nice companion if you're someone that's into trucks. I really love how soft these seats are. They're super comfortable, even these cloth seats. And again, the comfort only goes up if you can spend more money. I mean, you can even get massage seats here in the F-150, and you can't even get that in any of the other truck competitors. And so there are some really nice things about these F-150s. It's just unfortunately, these XLTs, you're pretty stripped on features, and that was one of the things that I didn't love with my experience with the F-150. I'm used to having a push-button start, proximity key, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just the way this one is configured, I would not do, because this one is about $58,000 as tested, and that's just crazy for an XLT. You can almost get a King Ranch for 58 grand. Obviously, it'd be, a low trim of a King Ranch, but you're still way above all the equipment you get here in this. And obviously, this one has like the Pro Power generator and 360 camera. It also has the Copilot 360 Assist, which gives you the adaptive cruise control. So there are some upgraded features on this one, but it still is just crazy. You can option up an XLT to be this expensive. And so, I would say if you are going for an XLT trim, at the very least, go for the 302A package. This one has a 301A package. The 302A gives you LED headlights. It gives you the bigger 12-inch screen. It gives you the proximity key, heated seats, a bunch of those really good features, because that is one thing. This one with these halogen headlights, the headlights, I mean, they work, but it's just no comparison to the better nighttime visibility you get with LEDs. And so all those things, I think, make the 302A a must-have, in my opinion. Again, your mileage will vary. It depends on, what you're looking for out of a truck and stuff. If you want something that doesn't have any frills in it, then, maybe this will be just fine. But I still think 58 grand for one of these is just insane. If you can get an XLT, in its $40,000 range, low 40s, mid 40s, okay. But, beyond that, this interior, you just feel like you're paying way too much money. If you're actually paying close to 60 grand, you have cloth seats with no heat, you have a, key you still have to twist and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of crazy the way this one's configured. configured. But, you know, one of the things I really loved about the way this one is configured was this 5-liter V8. It's a really great engine. I had no issues with the cylinder deactivation, which is new for this year. There's nothing there. The only mechanical thing that really let me down with the new F-150 is the transmission. It still isn't always super smooth, and it also often gets caught in the wrong gear still, where I'm like waiting for a beat or two for it to actually give me a downshift, and it's like, oh, okay, and then it'll, you know, give me the downshifts and stuff. You just notice the transmission. And the best transmissions, you know, if you're not looking at sports cars and stuff, the best transmissions are the ones you don't notice when they're working, and they work, you know, basically smoothly and flawlessly in the background. And unfortunately, this 10-speed makes itself known every once in a while, and I don't love that about it. I think that the 8-speed in the Rams, the Ram 1500 is a little bit smoother, and I think at the end of the day, the Ram is just a more polished truck in every way. I think, you know, like I said, it has a way better ride, much smoother, more luxurious, even in its lower trims. But I still think the F-150, you know, has made some really nice improvements here for 2021 to really get up to speed with the Ram in a lot of ways. I think especially the tech now is pretty comparable, and actually in some ways slightly better than the Ram, because you can't get digital gauges in a Ram like you can here in this. And so, you know, you do have some very nice improvements here in this new F-150, and, you know, in a lot of ways it will feel like the highest tech truck. It's the only one that offers a hybrid, you know, all those cool features like the Pro Power, you know, onboard generator. And there's a lot of really cool things where if it's a feature you're like, yes, I love that feature, I really want to use that every day, and it's, you know, something that, you know, if there are those types of things like this fold down armrest that, you know, you can open up into a workstation, that's really handy. And if you find yourself being like, wow, that feature or this feature in the F-150 will come in really handy, and that's stuff that the other truck manufacturers do not match, then the F-150 kind of is in a league of its own in many ways. And so it really just comes down to what your needs are, and, you know, what you're looking for in a truck, you know. And also if you want like a truck with massage seats, like I said, this is the only one that offers that. The fold flat seat, which this one doesn't have, but that is something available in the higher trims. You know, if you do plan to take naps in your truck and stuff, that's another feature that only this has. Another exclusive thing here to the F-150 that I did test out some more was the Ford Copilot 360 and their adaptive cruise system, which does have this lane keep assist. And I took it around some of the tightest turns on the highways here in western Pennsylvania, which are very windy highways, and it was very, very good at, you know, taking those turns, giving me as much steering as I needed to safely stay in my lanes. It never hesitated. It always made sure it stayed in those lanes. The only time that the system ever got confused was whenever I was coming up on an exit ramp and I wasn't in the exit lane, but I was wanting to continue on the highway, and whenever it would widen out, it would want to favor the shoulder, and then would just want me to automatically go into that exit lane whenever I didn't want to. So there were a few times where it got confused, and so that's something that I'm hoping that they do improve whenever they do the truly hands-free driving, which is coming later this year. And so whenever you do have that option on those F-150s, I hope they will be able to identify, so you don't have to constantly correct every time they're going past an exit to make sure that it doesn't go off the exit automatically. But aside from that, this system is really good. And one other little surprise I was surprised by with this F-150 is the stock standard stereo. So this one does not have the B&O upgraded stereo. You can get a really fancy B&O stereo which has speakers in the headrest and all that kind of stuff. This one has no branding. This is just the base, bare bones stereo you get in F-150s. And I was surprised. It actually sounds really good. I was listening through my wireless CarPlay source, listening to my, you know, MP3s and stuff, and it's actually surprisingly good. I was like, wow. Like, I mean, obviously the B&O Play is going to be better, but if you're not someone who's obsessed with having the absolute best sound experience possible, don't bother upgrading the stereo, because this stereo is more than adequate in my opinion. A very good, honestly one of the best standard stereos I've ever encountered. So very impressed with that, and something again I just was not expecting. And the last two things I mentioned here about the F-150 are its fuel economy and its pricing. So first we'll talk about fuel economy here. So now I've driven 244 miles and my average MPG has been 15.8 MPG. So these V8 versions of the F-150 for 2021 are rated at 16 MPG in the city, 22 on the highway, and 19 combined. And so, you know, I'm basically getting that city figure, and as far as my driving goes, it was mostly suburban, around town, stop and go kind of driving. I did do a decent amount of highway driving because I did test this, you know, driving assist system a little bit more extensively than I do with, you know, standard week-long vehicles that I test. But it still wasn't a massive amount of time on the highway. It certainly wasn't 50% of my driving. So to be getting, you know, that city rating, I'm pretty happy with. I think that, you know, this is the typical thing where the V8s often, in any naturally aspirated engine, often actually in the real world performs better than you would expect. And even though those EcoBoost options might test better, and honestly, the EcoBoost options don't really only test a couple MPG better. It's not a massive difference unless you're going for that full-blown hybrid version, and you're actually doing lots of stop-and-go driving. That one could end up saving you a good bit of money on gas and stuff. But aside from that, I think that, you know, you're not really going to pay much of a fuel economy penalty with this V8. And if you're someone who prefers the V8 or, you know, wants it for whatever your needs are, I think that it's still a fantastic choice. I really enjoyed the sound of it, the just instantaneous power you have here with it. And I mean, the EcoBoost engines are very impressive too. I tested the 2.7 EcoBoost for a week in the previous generation F-150, very much like that as well. With my past experiences with the EcoBoost, if you really get on that boost a lot, your fuel economy is going to be just as bad as it is in this. So, you know, it's going to come down to a usage case and what your usage case actually is. But yeah, just keep in mind this V8, you know, might not be as bad on gas as you're expecting. Also, this one has the 36-gallon upgraded fuel tank, which means you have tons of range here in this vehicle. And so, you know, after 245 miles of driving, it's still showing me 251 miles to empty. So it's about a 500-mile range, even with only getting, you know, about 16 MPG in this thing. If you did a highway drive, you know, you could eke that out probably closer to even 600 miles on the highway. And then the last thing to mention here about the F-150s is the pricing of them. And so, you know, if you go for a base bare bones work truck, obviously, you know, those are going to be starting still in a very affordable price point. But like I mentioned here with this XLT trim, you know, the prices do balloon pretty quickly, and you're looking at a $58,000 XLT. But like I said, you just have to be smart with the way you option one of these. And obviously, it's going to come down to what you need and stuff. But definitely, if you're, you know, careful with your options, I think this is a very good value, and it is very competitive with all the other stuff out there. They don't really have to be super competitive because there are so many of those exclusive features, but they still are very competitive, and I think that's why the F-150 retains its edge, because it gives you all these unique features, and it gives them to you still at a competitive price point. And so yeah, I mean, personally, if it were me speccing one, I would at least go for a Lariat trim. If I was spending 58 grand, I would probably stretch up to about 60 for a comparable four-wheel drive King Ranch or something, and get a bunch of those fancy toys, because I personally like a more luxurious truck myself. But if you're looking for a nice, honest work truck, a V8 XLT here will do just great. Just again, take it easy on the options so you don't feel like you're getting ripped off paying, you know, almost 60 grand having cloth seats that aren't heated and all that kind of stuff. Still just kind of crazy that they don't just throw that kind of stuff in once you get to these higher price points. But regardless, yeah, I really like the F-150. It makes sense why they sell, you know, hundreds of thousands of these things every single year. I mean, they know what they're doing, and that's why, you know, they make the right tweaks. They don't go crazy with styling. They don't, you know, do anything that's going to upset people too much, and that's why they just continue to build on their successful formula, and it certainly seems to be working, and just gets better here with this new 2021 version. But yeah, so that's about all my thoughts here on the new F-150. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thanks to Ford for providing me here with this new F-150 to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.